Remember, Peter had a little trouble going from the Jewish Orthodox rites that he learned to bringing the gospel to the Gentiles, which Paul did. So without further ado, bear with me today. We've got a lot going on in this program. Let's get right to it. And let's see. We're in Leviticus 11. And go bear with the cameraman here today. Have a little overview from Bible Project, chapters 11 through 15. So let's get right to that.
Sections are all about. Chapters 11 through 15 are about the ritual purity required of all the Israelites, and chapters 18 through 20 are about the moral purity of the people. Here's what's underneath all of this purity and impurity language. Because God is holy and he's set apart, the Israelites need to be in a state of holiness themselves when they enter into his presence. This was called being clean or pure. God's presence was off limits to anybody who was not in a holy state, and this was called being unclean or impure. Now, an Israelite could become impure in just a few ways: by contact with reproductive body fluids, by having a skin disease, by touching mold or fungus, or by touching a dead body. Now, for the Israelites, all of these were associated with mortality, with the loss of life, which gets us to the core symbol of all these ideas. You become impure when you're contaminated by touching death, so to speak. And death is the opposite of God's holiness, because God's essence is life. Now, this is really key. Simply being impure was not sinful or wrong. Touching these kinds of things was a normal part of everyday life. And impurity was a temporary state. It just lasted a week or two, and then it's over. What was wrong or sinful was to waltz into God's presence carrying these symbols of death and impurity on my body. Don't do that. Now, the last way of becoming impure was by eating certain animals. And the kosher food laws are found right here in this section. Now, there have been lots of theories about why certain animals were considered impure and off limits. To promote hygiene or to avoid cultural taboos, the text just isn't explicit. But the basic point of all of these chapters is really clear. All together, these work as an elaborate set of cultural symbols that remind Israel that God's holiness was to affect all areas of their lives. This corresponding section over here is about Israel's moral purity.
And when we get to chapter 18 through 20, we'll look at that. But that's really to kind of key you in for the next 4 chapters of Leviticus. And that was chapters 11 through 15 is what we'll be covering. And let's see here, we have a lesson from Torah class, which I think's pretty nice. I like the way the author here speaks of what the meaning of holiness is. So here we go.
The chief nature of holiness is wholeness and completeness.
Did you get that? So the chief nature of holiness is wholeness and completeness. Now, he's going to read for us today from the Hebrew Torah, the Bible. So it may sound a little funky or a little different to you today, but let's see what we got coming. Let's see if we can get there. Okay, try to move that up. 1, 2, 4. I think we got it. Hope we got it. Nope, a little bit too much. Try and. Come on. There we go. Hard to be perfectionist. There we go.
Leviticus chapter 11. If you have a complete Jewish Bible, it's page 119. We're going to read all of chapter 11. Adonai said to Moshe and Aharon, "Tell the people of Israel, these are the living creatures which you may eat among all the land animals. Any that has a separate hoof which is completely divided and chews the cud, these animals you may eat, but you may not eat those that only chew the cud or only have a separate hoof. For example, the camel, the coney, and the hare are unclean for you because they chew the cud, but they don't have a separate hoof. While the pig is unclean for you because although it has a separate and divided hoof, it doesn't chew the cud. You're not to eat meat from these or touch their carcasses. They're unclean for you. Of all things that live in the water, you may eat these. Anything in the water that has fins and scales, whether in seas or in rivers, these you may eat. But everything in the seas and rivers without both fins and scales, of all the small water creatures, of all the living creatures in the water, this is a detestable thing for you. Yes, these will be detestable for you. You're not to eat their meat, and you are to detest their carcasses. Whatever lacks fins and scales in the water is a detestable thing for you. The following creatures of the air are to be detestable for you. They are not to be eaten. The eagle, the vulture, the osprey, the kite, various kinds of ravens, the ostrich, the screech owl, the seagull, various kinds of hawks, the little owl, the cormorant, the great owl, the horned owl, the pelican, the barn owl, the stork, various kinds of herons, the hoopoe and the bat. All winged swarming creatures that go on all fours are a detestable thing for you. Except that of all winged swarming creatures that go on all fours, you may eat those that have jointed legs above their feet, enabling them to jump off the ground. Specifically, of these you may eat the various kinds of locusts, grasshoppers, katydids, and crickets. But other than that, all winged swarming creatures having 4 feet are a detestable thing for you. The following will make you unclean. Whoever touches the carcass of them will be unclean until evening. And whoever picks up any part of their carcass is to wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. Every animal that has a separate but incompletely divided hoof or that doesn't chew the cud is unclean for you. Anyone who touches them will become unclean. Whatever goes on its paws among all animals that go on all fours is unclean for you. Whoever touches its carcass will be unclean until evening. Whoever picks up its carcass is to wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. These are unclean for you. The following are unclean for you among the small creatures that swarm on the ground: the weasel, the mouse, the various kinds of lizards, the gecko, the land crocodile, the skink, the sand lizard, and the chameleon. These are unclean crawling creatures. Whoever touches them when they are dead will be unclean until evening. Anything on which one of them falls when dead will become unclean. Wooden utensil, article of clothing, leather, sacking, any utensil used for work, it must be put in water, and it will be unclean until evening, then it will be clean. If one of them falls into a clay pot, whatever's in it will become unclean. You're to break the pot. Any food permitted to be eaten that water from such a vessel gets on will become unclean, and any permitted liquid in such a vessel will become unclean. Everything on which any carcass part of theirs falls will become unclean, whether oven or stove, is to be broken into pieces. They are unclean and will be unclean for you, although a spring or cistern for collecting water remains clean. But anyone who touches one of their carcasses will become unclean. If any carcass part of theirs falls on any kind of seed to be sown, it's clean. But if water is put on the seed and the carcass part of theirs falls on it, it's unclean for you. If an animal of a kind that you are permitted to eat dies, whoever touches its carcass will be unclean until evening. A person who eats meat from its carcass or carries its carcass is to wash his clothes. He'll be unclean until evening. Any creature that swarms on the ground is a detestable thing. It is not to be eaten. Whatever moves on its stomach, goes on all fours, or has many legs, all creatures that swarm on the ground, you're not to eat them. These are a detestable thing. You are not to make yourselves detestable with any of these swarming, crawling creatures. Do not make yourselves unclean with them. Do not defile yourselves with them. For I am Adonai your God. Therefore consecrate yourselves and be holy, for I am holy. Do not defile yourselves with any kind of swarming creature that moves along the ground. For I am Adonai, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God. Therefore you are to be holy because I'm holy. Such then is the law concerning animals, flying creatures, all living creatures that move about in the water, all creatures that swarm on the ground. Its purpose is to distinguish between the unclean and the clean, and between the creatures that may be eaten and those that may not be eaten.
And that is the word of the Lord today from Leviticus chapter 11 and from the Jewish Torah, which is unusual for most to read. However, I thought it would be interesting to bring in a little different perspective today, so I did. And let's see here. Again, bear with me, sorry. Okay, let's see. And we have a little bit of a commentary too about that. Now, if you'll note, in the Israelite diet, meat was served only on special occasions. The ancient Israels ate many breads and cereals and fruits and vegetables and dairy products, but meat was very expensive, kind of like it's getting today, thanks to our current global crunch of the elite rich. And the typical family made up food of barley and wheat bread and grapes and figs and olive oil and beans and cucumbers and onions and cheese. And beef and lamb might grace the table on certain occasions, but definitely the pig wasn't allowed. It was offered to Babylonian gods and pagan worship. So pig was out, and anything that looked like it, kind of like the javelina that crawls around here in Arizona. And of course, dog. Well, that's sacred to the Chinese people, I guess, and cows and cats and things like that, and tigers. And also, hygiene was another consideration, because if you ate some of these things, you'd probably get very, very sick. Sea creatures was another thing, the ones that crawled on the bottom, kind of that most consider a delicacy and pay a lot of money for it. Shrimp, lobster, crab, octopus, all those things. And also among who'd want to eat an eagle or a vulture or a buzzard, but I guess there are people that need to be reminded not to do that, or to eat mice or rodents or reptiles. Another dumb thing, but I know when they used to do that in Russell's Roost, they used to cook up crocodiles and what is it? Or in Florida they do that, and I think they cooked up rattlesnake here. Definitely things you shouldn't be doing. The only insects that were allowed were like crickets and grasshoppers and locusts. I think John the Baptist had a few of those, and they actually sell them for quite a bit. Israel imports it to you for like, I think, $28 a pound. You can buy it online. So that is some of interesting things to bring up. But again, these were laws to really protect God's people, and it was. And notice how God spoke and brought a difference here between the government and the priest, because he had made Moses leader of the government, but Aaron was the head of the priesthood. So a little separation there. Involved both, but with God, everything involves both, because everything comes from God. But God was very interested in the ordinary and everyday life of people, as he should be, as we should be very interested in God every day of our life. He issues commands of what we should eat and what we shouldn't eat, but again, really to become separate, to become holy and whole. That was the idea. So let's see what else might be said here that I might have been forgetting. I think we pretty much covered most of it. Let me see here. Contaminated food or drink. Well, that had to be thrown out. Kind of like today. If you keep something around the kitchen for longer than its expiration date, usually you get that sour looking face on you. Kind of like the Lucy McGillicuddy, I Love Lucy type face on something that's just bitter and shouldn't be eaten. So you'll also notice this isn't the first time God spoke about food. Remember in Daniel 1 when they were taken into exile, Daniel and his friends there? Well, Daniel had told that he didn't want to eat at the king's table, that he wanted to have a kind of a vegan diet, and he said try it for 10 days. So Daniel and his friends refused to eat the non-kosher food on the Babylonian king's table, and God blessed them from being set apart for his righteousness. Cooking tools were also unclean, as it was noted, because it's contaminated with dead and unclean animals. So, why about the predators couldn't be eaten? Because they were unclean, because they ate both flesh and the blood of other animals, scavengers, and they were likely to carry disease. So, and they regularly contacted dead bodies, all potentially poisonous. Yeah, not very good for the digestive system. You know, some Christians believe we're still under the obligation to observe these dietary laws of clean and unclean animals today, but that's not true. First, these laws were specifically given to the children of Israel in verse 2. But second, this issue was settled once and for all at the Jerusalem Council in Acts chapter 15, that new Gentile Christians didn't have to become Jews to become Christians or followers of the way. So there it was determined that the obedience to the laws of Moses was not required for the followers of Jesus. It was follow Jesus, not follow Moses. So, you still with me? Did you follow all that? It was a lot to do today, wasn't it? But, you know, I appreciate you guys staying with me. And, you know, I try to bring you the most and the best that I can every day. So, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May his face graciously shine upon you. May he lift his countenance upon you and give you peace. Lord, I pray that you have spoken, these people who have tuned in today, Lord, I pray that you bless them. I pray, Lord, that they wanted to learn and that you spoke to their hearts, Lord, directly, Lord, and that you moved me out of the way, Lord. Sometimes I forget to pray at the beginning, so I'll pray here at the end. And I ask you, Lord, to cover a multitude of sins when we forget and we realize that too is sin, and we must confess it so that we can have clear and open communication with the Lord. Well, till tomorrow, or actually later on today, the question of the day, I'll be looking forward to seeing you. But if the Lord comes between now and then, I'm looking for you on the other side. God bless you and have a good day. And don't forget, spend daily word in the prayer. You definitely need to be in your prayer closet and make sure you're reading your Bible. You know, in fact, till it's falling apart. You know, that's what you want to do. Make sure you read it until the Bible reads you. Okay? God bless. Have a great day.